Number 5, Wicked Game. Yeah, you knew this episode was going to be on this list. Wicked Game has been called by many as Told by Ginger fans as the worst episode of the series. While I don't agree, I can understand on people's dislike for it because its execution is pretty bad. The episode takes place a few months after the second TV movie, Far From Home, or Foutley's on Ice, where Ginger returns to Shelter Shrubs after spending a semester at Avalanche Arts Academy. She starts hanging out with Darren more ever since he confessed his love for Ginger at the end of the previous episode. Dodie and Macy feel left out and think that their friendship with Ginger is over. Miranda and Mipsy feel irritated because they don't have the opportunity to make fun of her anymore. So they decide to team up to break up Ginger and Darren's relationship. I can believe Miranda and Mipsy would do something like this because they've pulled off pretty awful stuff in the past. Even if it's something so petty as Ginger not being Miranda and Mipsy's punching bag, I can give it a pass. As for Dodie, again, I can see her do this as well. She's been known for doing anything she can to get what she wants. So if she's willing to team up with Miranda and Mipsy to get her friendship with Ginger again, then yeah, I can see her wanting to ruin Ginger's life to make hers better. The one that really disappointed me was Macy. Macy would never do something this sinister to get her friendship with Ginger back. She's pure-hearted, loyal, and supportive for anything Ginger does. Just seeing this is a giant step backwards to Macy's growth as a character. It's hands down her worst moment in the series. As for Carl and Hoodsy's plot, it starts off with Carl's girlfriend, Noelle Sussman, playing cards with a girl named Polly Schuster and losing 3 games in a row. She had lost her shoe, her belt, and her glasses. For the 4th game, she bets on her boyfriend Carl, and loses. Carl has to spend the whole weekend with Polly as a playmate. He starts learning that she's a crazy bird-obsessed girl who squawks when she talks and dresses in feathers, pretending that a run-down backyard is a jungle. Blake sees Carl and Polly playing together and starts taking pictures of them to show Noelle that Carl is dating Polly. First of all, Noelle betting on Carl as the prize in a game of cards is absolutely ridiculous. This is the same premise as that SpongeBob episode, Welcome to the Chum Bucket, where Mr. Krabs bets SpongeBob in a game of cards against Plankton. That made sense because Mr. Krabs is too cheap to bet on something as money in a card game. Plus, that episode was both hilarious and touching, especially that song. But in Ginger, this plot feels really off, especially if it's someone as smart and observant as Noelle Sussman. Now, let's get to the ending because, oh boy, this is when things get really rough. Courtney overhears Miranda, Mipsy, Dodie, and Macy's plan of breaking up Ginger and Darren. She then tells Ginger that they're going to be having a 4-way phone call that night to discuss more details on it. Ginger and Darren overhear the conversation enough to see that Courtney was right.
Where are we to date? Okay, well, see, I placed a call to this guy Fred, pretending to be Ginger.
Sounded just like her, actually. I never thought Dodie was much of an actress, so the surprise was mine.
Anywho, I think he's going to call her back, which should really stir things up between her and Darren.
Thanks, Courtney. I've heard enough.
That was Ginger. It was an ambush. Macy? That was Ginger. What have we done?
Ginger is completely heartbroken that her best friends try to do something like this, not knowing if she's willing to forgive them for what they did. The episode ends with Dodie leaving a voice message apologizing to Ginger, leaving it on a cliffhanger note that we wouldn't know the answer to until 6 months later, and is done in a throwaway line.
Ginger, a girl must never put the feelings of an overly dramatic girlfriend before the feelings of her loving and doting boyfriend. People might talk, but it feels like a stab at Dodie. Dodie's a big girl, and she stabbed you in the back once before, if my memory serves. I guess.
No. Just no. I I can somewhat forgive Carl and Hoodsy's plot in the summer of Camp Caprice, where they never show them catching the dog napper and returning the dogs to their rightful owners, because there wasn't really that much at stake. This, on the other hand, needed a more detailed explanation on what happened between Wicked Game and the Easter ham.
It's fine. It's just that, well, today's the day Lucinda finds out if Dirk is really Clarice's father.
Even though everybody knows Dirk used to be a woman on the roller derby circuit.
He'll be here soon, I promise. Maybe Darren took the bus home instead. He asked me to wait here, Dodie. And we should. No question. It's just that, well, Our Loves Our Lives starts in 5 minutes, and we haven't missed a single episode this whole school year. Then why don't you guys go on without me? Oh, wouldn't dream of it. We BFFs stick together, you know.
If it wasn't for the fact that we never got a satisfying conclusion, this episode wouldn't be on this list. But it is. It's also a giant step backwards to Far From Home in terms of character development and story. Ginger and Darren's relationship is disliked by Dodie and Macy, even though they were okay with it at first. Carl and Noelle's relationship as a couple was so adorable, and it fits so well because they had so much in common. Noelle was a fantastic addition to the series ever since her first appearance in And She Was Gone. But then we have Polly, and she's nowhere near as good. She's annoying and one-note with her bird obsession. The girls' reasoning on why they want to break Ginger and Darren up is completely stupid, selfish, and petty. The best thing about this episode, once again, is Courtney. She actually cared about Ginger in this episode, more than I can say about her actual best friends. Plus, she said one of my favorite lines in the series.
Why would my best friends want to ruin something that makes me really happy?
Why do they make children's aspirin so very difficult for the small children to open?
While I can understand why many people call Wicked Game the worst episode of the series, I can name 4 more that are much, much worse. Number 4, Sibling Rivalry. Okay, first things first. I know that I mispronounced Sibling Rivalry and we're in between calling it Sibling Revelry. I just want to state my apology on this. For those who are wondering what the difference is, here you go. Revel means to enjoy oneself in a lively way, especially in dancing and drinking. Revile means to criticize in an abusive and angrily manner, which perfectly captures this episode to a T. With that said, let's get to the plot. It's another episode where both the Ginger and Carl plots mesh together into one, and they both suck. Ginger gets elected to Lucky Junior High Student Council and starts a Big Brother/Big Sister program where instead of someone being sent to detention, they would instead get a high school student to help them out. While Ginger believes this is a better way to lead the students down the right path, instead they take full advantage of the high school students, asking for free car rides, helping with homework, and helping them get more popular. In fact, they get into trouble on purpose so they can pair up with a high school student and use them to benefit themselves.
Ginger, I plan on ditching Jim and getting caught, so I'll be assigned a Big Brother, and I was wondering if you could hook me up with Mike Reddington, quarterback of the football team and total hottie. Oh, Ginger, in case anyone else tries to take credit for it, I'm the one who let the air out of Milty's tires. And I'd like Jessica Turner as a big sister. She's the most popular girl at Lucky High, and it would do wonders for my reputation to be seen with her. You know, I've never done anything bad in my entire life until today, and it feels great. Thanks.
Meanwhile, in Carl and Hoodsy's plot, they visit a baby whale on a trip to the aquarium, where they learn that it was rescued from the ocean after being starving. Carl decides to flush kelp/cauliflower plants in the toilet, believing it would lead to the sewers, and then the ocean so that the whales can eat. But their plan backfires horribly when their school toilets do not lead them to the sewers, but instead a septic tank. All of the school's toilets have been broken down, and the playground is covered with a slimy, icky goo. Mrs. Gordon thinks of a punishment for Carl, with Carl suggesting to place him in Ginger's Big Brother/Sister program at Lucky Junior High, thinking he would take the easy route. But Ginger decides to pair him up with the toughest high school student in the group, a militaristic kid named George. George sticks with Carl night and day, making sure he doesn't get into more trouble. He even has Carl straightening up his hair, clean his room, acting polite, and even getting the dinner dishes and washing them. Well, that sounds fine at first. George goes a little bit too extreme, telling Carl that he's going to sign him up for military school and wants him to destroy his clubhouse piece by piece. Carl, being miserable with George, begs Ginger to remove him from the program, but Ginger refuses, believing that Carl deserved the punishment. However, when Ginger learns more about the students taking advantage of their paired-up siblings, she decides to stop this program for good. Ginger is completely oblivious to the fact that her program isn't working at all, even to the point where she denies it whenever people are telling her about it. Her treatment to Carl is awful and completely out of place. I haven't seen Ginger treat Carl this bad since the pilot episode. While Ginger and Carl have little to nothing in common, Ginger always sticks with her brother and defends him whenever he acts weird. But at the same time, you can't take Carl's side either because he destroyed his school's septic tank for a plan that was not well thought out. Carl has always been a kid who plans 1 or 2 steps ahead and does proper research for his schemes. So him not finding out that the school runs on a septic tank instead of the sewers is a slight oversight that's not within his character. Then there's George. George is awful. I hate him. He's the worst thing in this episode. He's so determined to make Carl's life miserable that you start feeling bad for Carl, even though he kind of deserved the punishment. The one thing that makes this deeply flawed episode salvageable is when George tells Carl that if he fails as a student, then Ginger's program would fail. Carl accepts George's demands, even if it means him going to military school and destroying his clubhouse. Other than that, it's a complete mess. The characters are unlikable, the plot points are not thought out well, and both of the stories are frustrating to watch. Number 3. Next question. In this episode, Ginger is training for an academic quiz for an upcoming competition with another school, and she starts developing a crush on her teacher, Mr. Gardner. She keeps having daydreams about him, she compliments his sweater, and thinks he has a nice smile. It doesn't help much that Dodie tells Ginger that it was okay to have a crush on him. Throughout the entire plot, I was cringing every single moment. It gets even worse during the main event, where it's being filmed live in public access. I can't do it justice, just watch.
Lucky. Mr. Gardner, I was wondering if you might want to catch a movie with me or something.
Did she just say what I think she said?
Next question.
Of course he wasn't gonna go out with her on a date. Of course he didn't have a crush on her. She's 13 and he's like 40. Remember when I mentioned about how Ginger didn't deserve to win the band competition in Ginger's solo because she joined at the last minute and only did it so she can get too close to a boy she liked? Yeah, Ginger essentially blew up weeks of hard work and let her team and school down only to lose for something this benign. Sadly, the Carl and Hoodsy plot doesn't make sitting through this episode any better because it's so boring. Season 2 had the best Carl and Hoodsy plots in the series. Their stories were so entertaining and even so touching that it sometimes surpasses the Ginger plots. So the fact that this plot point is so forgettable and formulaic is inexcusable. It's once again another subplot about helping an animal. Groundhog's Day is around the corner, and Carl decides to free their town's groundhog so they can use its disappearance to sell his and Hoodsy's scarves. Similar to Ginger's solo, Carl and Hoodsy are pulling off a scam so they can make a profit. When they do free the groundhog, little do they know that Brandon's pet monkey, Mr. Licorice, saw them do the act. The next morning, the news reporters, the mayor, and local citizens gather around to see the reveal of the groundhog, only to learn that it's gone. They go into a severe panic, with Carl and Hoodsy getting ready to sell their scarves, but then Mr. Licorice shows up and goes completely insane by picking up the dog Muffin from blizzard conditions and climbs to the top of the groundhog's living quarters, looking very similar to King Kong. Then Carl sings the Teen Seal Girls song that was shown earlier in the episode, and Mr. Licorice calms down. When I first saw this episode, I thought that Mr. Licorice was going to let the townspeople know that Carl and Hoodsie were the ones responsible for setting the groundhog free. But nope! That never happens. Mr. Licorice acted crazy for absolutely no reason whatsoever and has no relevance to the plot. Their story abruptly ends with no one ever figuring out that Carl and Hoodsie were the ones that caused the groundhog to disappear. There are only two things I like about this episode. The first is the Teen Seal Girl song. It's nowhere near as iconic as the Little Seal Girl song, but seeing Carl and Brandon performing it together was pretty funny.
Take my flipper, let's move away towards a brand new dawning day, to a place where you and I can live as teen seals.
In a minute, I'm gonna spew stomach bile, you hear?
Just go along with it, Hoods. We can't raise any suspicions. Here comes the bridge.
As if they only knew what a teen seal wants to do. Every time the tide takes the seal girl out the sea.
The second thing is Lois's advice to Ginger when she asked Mr. Gardner out for dinner and causing her team to lose the competition. Her advice is one of the best she's ever given in this series.
Oh, sweetheart.
I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, I never actually believed he'd really say yes. I just hoped he would.
And as hard as it is to believe, this whole episode will pass and life will go on. And I'm talking from experience here.
So you're saying this kind of lunacy runs in the family?
No question, Ginger. You'll have a lot of crushes in your life. Some will make sense, others won't. You just gotta learn to recognize the difference.
I think I just did. Big time.
Other than that, this episode fails in every single way. If I'm not cringing at Ginger having a crush on a teacher, then I'm bored with Carl and Hoodsie pulling off another plan involving with an animal. Number 2, Driven to Extremes. This episode airs right after Next Question, and they both involve with Ginger with a teacher and Carl and Hoodsie helping an animal. However, it pulls it off 10 times worse. Ms. Zorsky is sick with the flu, and Ginger and her class get a new substitute teacher named Mrs. Grimley. She's a mean and nasty teacher who moves the student's desk to face against the wall, has a lot of strict rules, and whoever disobeys them has to write 500-word essays on the most random subject. Miranda and the group plan on TPing Mrs. Grimley's house for revenge. But then the stakes get even higher when they add throwing eggs to their plan. Ginger feels that they're going way too far and even jumps in front of Mrs. Grimley when they throw the eggs at her. Ginger hopes to get some gratitude for saving Mrs. Grimley from being covered in eggs, but nope!
What's going on?
It isn't obvious?
Oh,
Oh? You mean you don't care?
it's happened before.
But, Mrs. Grimley, the students hate you.
I learned a long time ago not to care what students think of me. I just have to stick it out until my tour of duty is over. Now, good night.
Ginger, of course, doesn't take it very well.
She doesn't care. At all. But they're going to care. Miranda, Courtney, you ruined their prank, Ginger. Well, you know what? I don't care.
As for Carl and Hoodsie's plot, it's once again very boring and very formulaic. Brandon and Mr. Licorice are practicing for a pet show. Mr. Licorice refuses to wear his costume or dance to Brandon's piccolo music, so Carl and Hoodsie become the monkey's agents and think of different talents, eventually coming up with the idea of him riding a motorcycle. It's finally gotten to the point in the series where the Carl and Hoodsie plots are relying on cliches for their story. This is the same plot I've seen in both Doug and SpongeBob. It's so sad to see all the original stories they received in Season 2 degenerate to something this low, especially since Driven to Extremes is the season finale. Even the competition scene is pretty hard to watch. Oh, but that's not the worst ending. It's Ginger's plot, hands down. Ginger was deemed as a traitor by her classmates, and Mrs. Grimley doesn't give Ginger any respect for saving her from being egg-pelted. She concluded that she had enough and moves her desk to its original spot, with Mrs. Grimley threatening her with a 30,000-word essay. She doesn't budge and tells Mrs. Grimley off on how to be respected.
Well, just wait until Ms. Zorsky hears about this.
Ms. Zorsky? Ms. Zorsky? You, Mrs. Grimley, are no Ms. Zorsky. Last time I checked, substitute teacher meant a teacher in place of another teacher, not a person pretending to be a teacher. Sure, I took a stand, only it was the wrong stand. We deserve to be punished for the TPing and the egging, but especially for not standing up to you from the very beginning.
The episode concludes with Ginger ending up in detention, adding a giant flaming middle finger to this massive train wreck. Same complaints from next question. It's a frustrating Ginger plot with a boring Carl and Hoodsie plot. Next! Before I get to number 1, here are a few dishonorable mentions. Of Lice and Friends, a terrible Dodie-centric episode where she takes full advantage of doing the school announcements to spread gossip to make herself popular. Being one of the first episodes of season 1, it paints a consistent portrayal of Dodie as a person who will do anything to get popular, even if it means ruining her friends' lives. Piece of my heart. It's one of the most forgettable Carl and Hoodsie plots in the series. Carl and Hoodsie plan on stealing a pig's heart from the middle school science lab to save the town's heroic cow. Blink also assists them in their tasks for absolutely no reason. Darren receives an invitation from Courtney Grippling asking him to the dance without realizing that it was meant for his older brother Will. Ginger tries to tell Darren the truth with him not believing her. I hate plots like this. If Darren would just sit down and listen to Ginger talk for 30 seconds, this conflict wouldn't exist. The only good thing about this episode is Hoodsie having a crush on Macy and disguising himself as a mystery man to go out with her to the dance. However, his crush on Macy never gets brought up in the series ever again. Fast reputation. It has one of the worst Ginger plots in the series, with Ginger getting tired of having a nice girl reputation. She decides to sneak into the high school party and meets up with a boy named Jake. There are rumors spread around that Ginger and Jake made out at the party, and Ginger develops a fast reputation for being a bad girl. While Ginger had wanted to become popular in season 1, this episode takes place around season 2, where she wasn't caring about it as much anymore. Also, she never had an issue of being nice anywhere throughout the series, making it out of place. If it wasn't for Carl and Hoodsie's amazing plot of opening a gross-themed food cart, I would skip this episode entirely. Love with a proper transfer student. This is another botched attempt of trying to combine the Ginger and Carl plots together. Dodie develops a huge crush on a transfer student named Joaquin and auditions for a school play that he has the lead role in. Ginger gets the leading girl role instead and tries to tell Joaquin about Dodie when he starts developing a crush on Ginger. She develops the crush too and has to make a decision on choosing her best friend or a guy she likes. Dodie's portrayal is pretty awful in this episode, trying to call dibs on Joaquin because she saw him first and made Ginger feel awful that she stole her man, even though Joaquin didn't know Dodie existed. Instead of being supportive that Ginger and Joaquin were going out, she gets furious. As for Carl and Hoodsie's plot, they come up with an idea of creating a love potion to make lots of money. They decide to test it on Ginger first. When Ginger starts developing the crush on Joaquin, Carl and Hoodsie thinks that it was their potion that caused it to happen. Nothing much to say about it, so moving on. Finally, there's the Easter ham. It isn't bad enough that this was the episode that took place right after Wicked Game, but it has a pretty obnoxious Ginger plot as well. Ginger is preparing a birthday party for Darren, Carl and Hoodsie are going door to door performing for people with an Easter bunny costume to sell last year's candy, and Lois is preparing for Easter dinner. Taking a page from Christmas with the Cranks, we have Lois and Joanne fighting over the last ham at the supermarket. However, Joanne pulled a muscle from her arm and suffered a slight heart attack due to the amount of stress that she had. If you've seen episodes featuring Joanne Bishop, you know that she overreacts to everything in the nth degree. When Joanne fully recovers at the hospital, she forbids Dodie and Hoodsie being around Ginger and Carl. So Dodie can't make it to Darren's party, making Ginger wonder if she should continue her plans or not. And Carl and Hoodsie's money-making plan is delayed. Dodie meets up with Darren to ask Ginger to cancel the party because she couldn't go.
It
doesn't seem fair to cancel because of a war between mothers.
I thought you might say that.
It would mean a lot if you just told Ginger that it's okay with you to have this party.
But it's not okay with me, Darren. In the old days, Ginger would have never put a party before her BFFs. But now that she has a boyfriend, she doesn't care anymore.
You know, you say Ginger doesn't care about the BFFs anymore. But what about you? You only care about yourself, and you're missing a party.
This is the sticking point that makes me irritated that we never got a proper follow-up to Wicked Game. Because it showcases clear as day that Dodie doesn't care about anyone but herself. If nothing goes her way, then she whines and complains about it. Oh, but don't worry. Ginger tries to sneak into Dodie's house and tells her that she's going to invite her anyway because she couldn't throw her boyfriend's party without having her best friend by her side. Ugh. As a follow-up episode to Wicked Game, it's awful. But as a standalone episode, it's mediocre leaning towards bad. After much deliberation and rewatching the series again and listening to We're in Between again, it took me a long time to decide on which would be my least favorite episode of As Told by Ginger. So after all of that, I finally concluded that number 1 was Battle of the Bands. If I can sum this episode in 2 words, it would have to be wasted potential. If you're wondering if this episode is going to be about Ginger competing against other bands with her own, after all, we have seen in a few episodes that she does have a band alongside with Orion. But, of course not. It's about the high school's music department having to dismiss a majority of their band members, including Macy, because the budget is being used for the football team's stain-resistant uniforms. Ginger wishes to gather the school together so that they can get the band back together. So we essentially have a plot where Ginger is trying to do a good cause for the school, but it completely backfires. This is the same plot as Sibling Rivalry. But unlike that episode, where Ginger was at least trying to help the students go down the right path, here, her main goal is not to help out the band, but instead to get revenge at Darren after breaking up with her for Simone. As for Darren, he becomes pretty unlikable, using his popularity as a football player, boasting about his stain-resistant uniforms, throwing assembly meetings after school where he gets to show off his skills, and selling low-fat smoothies to generate more students to his side, including Macy and Orion. As for Dodie, instead of sticking with Ginger and Macy, her best friends, she instead sides with the Pep Squad cheerleaders because she doesn't want to be blacklisted as the enemy. Yeah, you can clearly understand why fans of the series hate Dodie so much. As for Carl's plot, it had an amazing concept. Throughout the series, we've seen Carl transition from a troublemaking kid to wanting to start over from scratch and become a more mature preteen. But things were stacked against him when he first entered Lucky Junior High because of his reputation of causing a lot of antics among his teachers and pupils.
Boys?
Milty, might I preempt? Hoodsy and I would just like to say that we are pleased as punch to find ourselves once again under your highly competent...
Can it, Carl. Can it, mark it down, put it on display in a highly visible sales kiosk. I'm still not buying. That's precisely why I'm taking time out of my busy day to walk your file around to each and every one of your new teachers.
Miss Sorsky, Carl Foutley here. How you doing? Oh, no, please, don't get up. We've met before. You were in my living room once, and you love my sister Ginger? We're practically kin. You and I, not she and I.
I'm afraid it's too late, Carl. Milty already got to me, and while I hate to jump to conclusions about anyone, I feel I would be remiss if I didn't say, what you did to that remedial math class, that was wrong, Carl.
Thing of it is, even bad dogs can be good, Mr. B. May I call you Mr. B? Okay, I'll take it you're indifferent. Once you get to know me, I'm an absolute angel. Honest. I'm on a roll from here on out.
Stay out of my way, Carl Foutley, and I'll stay out of yours.
In this episode, Carl is tempted to pull off his old pranks and schemes when he hears a voice in his head to do bad things. He promised himself that after he graduated Lucky Elementary, that he was going to quit his troublemaking ways and not cause any mayhem at the middle school. But then he thinks of a loophole plan to cause one final prank at Lucky High School. While all of Carl and Hoodsy's plots on this list were either dull or frustrating, I feel like this plot could have been salvaged to be something good. At first, it was very promising. But the final scene is what killed it, which leads me to Courtney's plot. Throughout the series, Courtney transformed from a high-maintenance, naive, rich girl to a teenager who is open to trying new things and expanding her friendship with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy, and spending less time with Miranda, Mipsy, and the other popular girls. A lot of people cited Courtney as one of their favorite characters as told by Ginger, and for good reason. She's such a caring character that has a bubbly personality and a great sense of humor. As shown earlier, she was able to make the bad episodes a little bit more tolerable. But in Battle of the Bands, she gets treated in the absolute worst way. Even more than what happened to her family in the series finale, which I'm not going to spoil. So it starts with Courtney talking to her mom on her cell phone in the bathroom when a pair of girls walked in. Courtney offhandedly said an insult about the girl's appearance that causes them to throw her cell phone in the toilet, stuff her in a trash can, and ban her from entering the girl's bathroom for the rest of the school year. Courtney retaliates by setting up her own personal porta potty at the vice principal's parking spot, and refuses to move until she can gain access to the bathroom again. She even has the local news involved. So this is where the Carl and Hoodsy plot starts to mingle with the Ginger plot. Carl and Hoodsy see Courtney's porta potty thinking that it belongs to the vice principal, so they decided to push it away. But it turns for the worse when they lose control of it, ending up at the football game where Darren misses the winning catch, Courtney gets humiliated in front of the entire school, Ginger's protest is completely ignored, and Darren thinks that Ginger was involved in the prank because her brother was the one that caused it. And to add insult to injury, Ginger's plot ends on a cop-out.
Oh, great. Did they double their order or something? What are they gonna cut next? Lunch?
Nope. They're sending them all back. A couple of the guys on the team said they weren't as comfortable as the old jerseys.
They were kind of itchy, if you ask me.
As for Carl's plot, just like some of the other episodes on this list, it just stops. Interesting thing to note about Battle of the Bands, it's, as of right now, the only episode of As Told by Ginger besides the wedding frame that has never been aired on TV. The episode is boring, bland, frustrating, and completely pointless. I mean it. You can skip this episode entirely and not miss a single thing. As Told by Ginger is known for their flowing storyline that continues their continuity in multiple episodes. Even most of the plot points on the episodes on this list are brought up at least once, but not in Battle of the Bands. This episode is a complete waste of time, and I consider it number 1 on my list. Yeah, and that's my top 10 worst episodes of As Told by Ginger, and you know, I feel really bad for doing this. Because, as you guys know, I really love the show. But I'm not just gonna go off blindly saying that it's a perfect show in every single way. Because it's not. But it was kind of hard doing it. I still stand by that it's one of the greatest Nicktoons ever made. And even though the fanbase has been slowly growing over the years, it's still very obscure and underappreciated. It houses some of the best characters, stories, and morals in any Nicktoon you'll ever see, and it still stands the test of time. So for those who have yet to see As Told by Ginger, I implore you to please check it out. It's an unforgettable experience that you will not regret in being a part of. After doing this list, I need to do something a little bit lighter in tone. Go back to the roots of Old School Lane. Discuss about something that not a lot of people know about, but they should. But what has the same spirit of As Told by Ginger, but done in a completely new way? What can I cover next for Old School Lane? Perfect. That'll do.
wanna come over tonight. Yeah, you wanna make up and make it right. When everybody's looking for something else they can do, we try to make it work this time. We had let go of our doubts. Let's make it matter, 'cause we will never ever come down. It looks like